You have to excuse me, I'm going to read from my bit of paper because I've just been asked very quickly to drop up here and introduce Daniel. So, our next speaker is Daniel Clayton from Treasury, talking about full stack Agile. And I guess from my perspective, very, very pleased to see someone from government coming along and talking about the Agile journey. So what have I got about Daniel? Daniel is passionate about delivering quality technology solutions using Agile. Certified Scrum Master, 13 years, IT experience, banking, telecommunication, has worked with Scrum, Kanban and XP. So please welcome Daniel and enjoy the next 40 minutes. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Might just have to bear with me. I've been a bit sick for the last few days, so I'll try not to cough up a lung on stage. Okay, getting started. What is full stack Agile? So I guess it's all around the thinking about Agile values, the mindset. Obviously, a lot of people have talked about that over the last day or two. And so what I guess we're trying to do, and what I think we're doing well within our team at Treasury, is to think about everything, not just within the team, within the practices we're doing, but also about things like infrastructure, how we approach infrastructure and try and be more agile, how we approach architecture, and how we can build a good sort of governance structure around our team that supports working in an agile sort of way. So yeah, basically trying to expand the agile practices beyond the team. So I guess key to this is the core values. So everyone's probably really familiar with the Agile Manifesto, the 4 main values of the Agile Manifesto. I actually really like this. This is some work that Alistair Coburn's been working on called The Heart of Agile. It sums down those 4 key values into 4 key words: deliver, reflect, improve and collaborate, which I think sums up those Agile values really nicely. I think the thing I like most about this probably is it's actually really easy to communicate this to people who don't work in an Agile way or aren't necessarily familiar with Agile. It's nice and succinct, great for dealing with stakeholders, those sort of things, who maybe get a bit scared off by a manifesto. So I think it's something that people should try and maybe use a bit more. It's definitely not something that's sort of widely discussed and things. So really quickly, what am I covering? Talking about Agile architecture, cloud infrastructure and how the cloud can help you deliver in an Agile way, scaling down scaled Agile, which may be topical, and a little bit around culture. I work for Treasury, more specifically the New Zealand Debt Management Office. I assume nobody here has ever heard of, or maybe, no, there might be some people who have heard of the New Zealand Debt Management Office, but generally most people have never heard of the Debt Management Office. I know there's a couple of people here who've worked with the Debt Management Office. So basically, we're often referred to as a microbank. Debt Management Office is around 30 people, part of the Treasury. We're an operational arm of the Treasury, and effectively we're responsible for funding the government. So making sure that each of the government departments has money to pay for the various services they provide. We also provide financial services and policy advice to the rest of the government, and everything that a normal commercial bank does, just on a smaller scale. So we're 30 people, but we deal with some pretty big numbers as well. Reasonably important in the scheme of things. Of the 30 people at the Debt Management Office, we've got about 9 or 10 people currently working on a change program. What are we currently doing? Well, we're 2 years into a 3-year change program. The change program basically set up 5 key sort of drivers of the change. First being today is unsustainable, which is a pretty sort of standard thought, I suppose. We have legacy applications. They do their job adequately, but they don't allow us to move forward or do new things. Placing like with like is a poor investment. We want to be able to do things better, be able to make better decisions, and taking what we had before is not going to allow us to do that. We have an expanded mandate, so our existing systems are we're just focused on the debt management office, but we want to build a shared capability that the rest of the government or rest of the Treasury can use. Investing information is really important. I think most businesses realise this now, and I guess what we're trying to do is take that to heart, use information to make really good decisions and provide better value for taxpayer money. And I guess the thing that's key to me is the agile delivery. So recognising that an agile is the way to move forward. So why agile? I guess when you start any change program or piece of work, you can kind of do it however you like, I suppose. There's nothing setting out the change program saying that we need to do it in an agile way. But what our business do is they recognise that they want to see value as quickly as possible, which I think hopefully resonates with most people in here. They don't know everything, and they don't have time or money to hang around and wait to understand those before building whatever they need to build. So I guess first up, I want to talk about agile architecture. Architecture, I suppose, is one of the things that people often don't necessarily consider as an agile discipline. It's something that often happens at the beginning of a big piece of work based on an understanding of requirements and knowledge at that time. Is set in stone and then is left to a delivery team to go through and build. Obviously, as knowledge and things develops over time, requirements become better understood, that architecture may not be able to move forward with those changes. So I guess what we're trying to do is think about how we can better integrate architectural practices into an agile environment and provide a way for that to be able to keep up with change. So architecture should evolve, right? I guess the key things that the Agile Manifesto set out, responding to change over following a plan and having working software over comprehensive documentation, are obviously really good things to aim for. We should allow it to evolve and adapt as much as possible, right? I guess on the flip side of that, though, is that can potentially add to increased complexity if you don't actually have a plan to follow. Any of these spaghetti monsters. So I guess what you're trying to do is find a balance between having working software with good documentation and actually being able to follow some sort of plan. I think one of the key things that we've done is we've effectively have someone who sits in the role of a servant architect. So people may be familiar with the idea of a servant leader, someone who's leading a team from within, basically using their skills and knowledge to help the team to develop, to mentor the team. And I guess this is something that we have done. We have someone who sits in this role in the team, and he, as an architect, is really there as a facilitator rather than someone sitting in an ivory tower telling us how to do things. I think it puts us in a good position because he can actually live the architecture. He can help us build. He can help us to respond to change as things needs to change. I guess it's a change from the command and control to working more collaboratively. And I think it has helped us to deliver a solution which has evolved and does continue to evolve over time, and it continues to meet all the business needs and requirements. It is also really good because it encourages the team to take ownership of what they're doing. They don't feel like they're being pushed in one direction. They can actually own the architecture as well. They feel like they can contribute and they can feed back into any of the architectural decisions, and they're involved in the process as well. So it's all around building a collaborative way of working. Everybody has value to add, even from the most junior developer. They can suggest things, and the architects can help facilitate those decisions and discussions, and use their knowledge to drive the team and to help the team to build good software. One of the other things that our servant architect has really helped us with is the establishment of what we're calling an architecture framework. So effectively, this is our Bible. This is how we build stuff. This is probably the first technical document that the team put together. It's not a design document, but I guess it's a desired way of building stuff. When we started the program, we didn't necessarily know what we were going to do, but we could make some pretty good assumptions on how we wanted to do it. And this architecture framework document basically set out that. So I guess what it is allowing us to do is allows the team to be more autonomous, because we've got a set of best practices we want to follow, a tools chain, stack, we've got infrastructure and application architectures that we want to follow. And it means that when we come to building a component of the system, we can basically pick up that framework and say, well, that's actually how we want to approach building it. We don't have to go through a process of documenting, getting that past a architecture governance group, because the governance group has already signed off on our framework. They're happy that we've got a good process and we're following best practices on how we build things. And I guess the architecture framework is one way that we've been able to improve our turnaround, has saved us a lot of time and effort, and allows us to respond and change as we need to. So within the architecture framework, we set out a few of our architectural principles. Possibly one of the slightly more controversial ones is buy over build. For a development shop, obviously you want a job, you want to build things. Developers like to get their hands dirty. There's plenty of getting hands dirty in our team, but I guess the aim is that we'll always look out to the market to see if there's something that does what we need it to do, that we don't have to build. There's obviously risk and complexity around building systems. There's also potentially longer turnaround on delivering business value if you've got to do it yourself. So I guess it's one of the things we encourage. Set out our architectural principles is to buy over build, obviously service-oriented, infrastructure as a service, and generally trying to approach everything in an agile way of working. Central to what we're doing is we're actually a data project. We have a data warehouse. Data warehouses and agile aren't necessarily things that people see together in the same light. I guess what we're trying to do here is we're also trying to work in an agile way with a data warehouse. It's actually a lot easier than you think, and there's some really, really good tools that help you to work in an agile way. I think the big thing for us is taking a data-first approach and basically collecting as much information and data as we possibly can, and then basically be able to present that back to the business. So we're a Microsoft shop, we're Microsoft top to bottom, and using tools like Excel, we can connect directly to our data warehouse and provide the business direct access to the raw data. The great thing about this is that the business can then go away and start prototyping and building their own reports. They can start interacting with dashboards and playing with data, so they get a handle on what's there. They can feed back to us, and we can work collaboratively with them to build new data and build new relationships with the data before we go down the path of building reports and building things that I guess are normally, from a data warehousing perspective, are the first things you think about. So I guess it's just trying to adapt maybe the normal ways of working into a more agile way, and trying to deliver value to the business as quickly as possible. So I guess one of the things for us, which is really, really big, is that we're in the cloud. I don't think there's probably too many government agencies that can say they're in the cloud. We're actually in the public cloud. We host data offshore, which is really quite a big feat. Why? In 2012, the Minister of Internal Affairs mandated a government cloud-first approach, basically citing that they wanted to simplify things as much as possible and create a shared capability so that other agencies can use infrastructure more efficiently. Yeah, we've basically moved everything that we currently do into the cloud. There's some really good benefits from being in the cloud. Security is probably one of the big ones, provided you're not running a adult hookup website, which we're not, just to be clear. Business continuity is great as well. We've got our information hosted offshore, but we actually replicate data across the world, so we don't rely on a single data centre anywhere in the country to yeah, whatever I'm going to say, forgotten. Okay, and cost is the other thing that's probably maybe sort of less obvious, but the cost of running cloud infrastructure is drastically lower than your typical machine room and you have in your office. So why is it awesome? Pay as you go. I think this is probably the big one, and this is probably one of the things that allows us to be really, really agile. With infrastructure as a service, and particularly what we're doing in the public cloud, we only pay for things that are currently turned on. So if we turn off infrastructure, we don't pay for it. Same thing with licensing, software licensing. If you are using databases, database licensing often tends to be quite a big component of your infrastructure costs. Turn off a database, you don't pay for your licenses. So this obviously extends beyond just your production environments. If you dev and test any playpen environments, you can stand up machines and test environment for a couple of weeks to do some particular testing, turn it off, and then you're no longer paying for it. So the cloud is a really, really good enabler of agility, I believe, and we're definitely using it really heavily in this way. I guess the other thing is that it's all an operational cost as well, so you don't have to worry about depreciation assets or anything like that as well. So it does simplify the process quite considerably. What else have I got here? Yeah. So getting to the cloud for us wasn't necessarily an easy process. We've had a number of different government agencies come and talk to us, and they've all been very curious as to how we've managed to do it. I think we're the first government agency to use the public cloud to actually host data offshore, and to get to the cloud was really quite a journey into the unknown for us. Nobody had done it before, so there was a lot of learning to be done. I think overall we had a 15 sort of step process that we had to follow, and took about 9 months. Involved all sorts of internal process, cloud assessments, questionnaires, information security design, assessments. We had engaged with the GCAO and GCSB as well, which is an interesting, very, very interesting process. You don't actually hear back from the GCSB. You basically submit all your information to them, and if you don't hear from them, it's a good sign. Although they're probably listening. So it's a 9-month process, but it was really, really worth it. I think that the position it puts us in now, and the agility that we have through the use of the cloud and the infrastructure, completely outweighs all the effort that took. Obviously, during that 9-month period, we were still actually actively working and developing. It's just that we were using cleansed data. So the main thing for us was the data, using production data. We needed to go through this approval process, but that didn't stop developers from setting up machines for using information that had been cleansed, removed of anything that was even marginally close to the data we had, and using that to build and to work with the infrastructure. So how are we using the cloud? So absolutely everything we have is in the cloud. This includes all of our developer machines as well. So all our developers basically use remote desktop and rely on that to access the environment. It's great because it means that when you get grumpy developers who are unhappy about the specs of their machine, you can just go to a web console, select a bigger size, save, restart, and then suddenly they've got plenty of room to play. We can also turn off developers' machines at the weekend to encourage them not to work, again, realising savings and cost as well. Everything is web-enabled, which I guess is pretty much the standard way of working. So we have user interfaces to access web mobile devices, tablets to access information that we provide. We're using things like Excel services and SharePoint to present information directly via the cube, which is probably the centre data warehouse we've got, and that's multi-device as well. So being a micro bank, we all love Excel, we love playing with data, and so these sort of tools allow the business to directly access that. Really easy to roll out interactive dashboards and present information. I guess the other thing is the auto-scaling, which I guess mentioned briefly. With the cost savings that can be realised by turning off infrastructure and licensing costs, we've set up a lot of auto-scaling. So, for instance, at weekends and things, we turn off a lot of our production environments to save costs and licensing, save money by turning off test environments when they're not being used. We can stand up things when we want to. Overnight, we reduce things down to half capacity and that sort of thing. And when you add all of that up, it does actually end up being quite a big cost saving. I guess the other thing is that with infrastructure in the cloud is that it allows us to do a lot more experiments, because the cost of running machines for a week and then throwing them away, there's a very low cost in turning machines on and standing them up. It takes 15 minutes to build a new machine. We've got it scripted, so we don't actually have someone sitting there. They just basically run a script and we've got a new machine stand up. So we can install new versions of system software, try new things, completely break stuff, throw it away, get a new one. It provides a really nice environment to experiment, to try things, to do things that you'd normally be scared of, because you can have some grumpy sysadmin come after you because you just toasted something. Yeah, a really, really safe environment and allows you to work in a nice, agile way. I guess the other thing is that we're really lucky. We're a small team, and we have full ownership of all of our infrastructure. So DevOps, yes, but we also do a lot more than that. The team is obviously accountable for deploying and things in the environment, but they're also accountable for monitoring and maintaining the environment. The cloud infrastructure provides a lot of really, really good tools to do all that. You don't have to have the knowledge that you used to have when managing environments, and it provides a great accountability back to the team. So they are aware or are more aware of bad decisions that they might make from a technical perspective or a architectural perspective, because they see the flow-on impacts into the production environments. Obviously, we still have controls and segregation around that. People can't just hop into a production environment and start playing with things. We've got plenty of controls around that. But having the team actually own the environment, I think ends up building and delivering a better solution as well, because they're more engaged, it's a more ownership around the process. There's a more of a you break it, you fix it approach. And we can also respond quickly to change as well. Developers make suggestions around how infrastructure could be set up, and we can actually turn around and implement those changes, or try those changes out in a sandbox. So there are great benefits of having ownership of it. So maybe moving slightly away from some of the more infrastructure stuff, we obviously work with a lot of third parties, and I guess one of the things that we do our best to do is when we start our engagements with a third party is we actually try to be quite clear about our ideal ways of working, and so that we communicate to them that we want to work in an agile sort of way. Now, obviously, looking with vendors and suppliers, a lot of them don't do that. But I guess what we're trying to do is try to work in them in a more collaborative sort of way. We, obviously being in the cloud, we rely heavily on software as a service, so we have a lot of vendors who provide software as a service for us, and for them, a lot of the time, it's quite natural for them to take an agile approach. However, for instance, IT managed services, we use one of the all of government suppliers to do some of the more mundane aspects of server maintenance. Really don't get agile. But what we've tried to do is encourage a more collaborative sort of way of working with them. We have taken a more iterative approach rather than a big bang approach as to what they normally would take. And I think actually we've ended up with a much better result. We've definitely had a more interaction with them and are working more proactively with them than I think most organisations they have worked with have in the past. And again, I guess it's all around trying to deliver the best results possible. So, moving on. Enterprise Agile. I guess often when people think about Enterprise Agile, maybe not so much now that there's been a lot of talk about it, but people thinking about Enterprise Agile being about having lots of teams in a big organisation. In my mind, Enterprise Agile is a lot more about trying to engage and work more interactively with the business in an agile sort of manner. So I guess we think we're doing a reasonably good job of this. Not perfect, but I just wanted to share a little bit about how we're doing that. Oh, you pressed the wrong button. There we go. So when people think about Enterprise Agile frameworks, this probably comes to mind. Obviously, Dean Liffenwell put a lot of work into the Scaled Agile framework, and there's a lot of organisations that use this. I don't think I probably need to go into too much detail around this, so I will just skip on to the next part. However, there's a lot of criticisms around Scaled Agile. I guess when you look at this big picture, there's a lot of stuff going on. It seems quite daunting. The Agile release train, which is the sort of bottom 2/3 of the thing, of the picture here, corresponds, if you read the documentation, to around 50 to 125 people, or sort of 5 to 15 Agile teams. So there's a lot of roles, a lot of people involved. Some of the feedback and criticisms of Scaled Agile says it's not really, doesn't really feel that agile. It's maybe not going nicely with the Agile Manifesto. It's more around the process, and it's just too big and too prescriptive. So I guess what we've tried, then sort of have to question, well, would you actually need an Enterprise Agile framework? In particular, we're a single team. We're actually probably the only development team in Treasury. So why are we even contemplating the idea of an enterprise framework? We work pretty well with our business already. We're 30 people in our business unit. What is Enterprise Agile going to provide to us? We can do everything ourselves. So I guess coming back to the view that Agile is about how you interact with the business, what we've tried to do is actually to scale Scaled Agile down. So there's a lot of really valuable things that the Scaled Agile framework provides. I think probably the big one is some structure, and even with a small team, actually having some structure is a good thing. I think also that when you're working with external parties and stakeholders, it probably provides a bit more confidence if they can see some structure. They don't just see a single team running off and being agile, and can be a bit more confident that they actually have capability to deliver and they're actually following some sort of process. So I guess what we have done is, we're a single team, so we've taken the Agile release train and really scaled it down. We've got 10 people working in a team, and we have a lot of cross-functional people. A lot of the shared roles that exist within an Agile release train, like the DevOps, they fit within the team. It's really just been simplified down quite considerably. Yeah, I guess we're just not big enough to support the whole process. So we've taken the bits out of the Scaled Agile that we want, and have used that to hopefully deliver a good structure. Integrated DevOps, and I guess the other thing is with the Scaled Agile framework, setting out an 8 to 10 week shippable increments, product increments. We're trying to encourage releasing as frequently as possible. We don't have multiple teams to integrate with or to deliver alongside, so obviously it simplifies the process quite a bit, not having to worry about that. I guess the big thing in any process is the feedback loops. So with the Scaled Agile framework, I don't think it's necessarily clear about the feedback loops that should occur or need to occur between the release train, between all the roles, back up through the governance structure to the top level. So I guess it's really key about remembering the core values, the aim to work collaboratively and to be open and honest about how things are going. Probably the key role or key aspect of our scaled Agile framework, whatever you want to call it, is our features group. So this really sits in the middle. This is at the program level, where we're in the Scaled Agile framework we have a product management group and a business owners group. So the features group are basically a group of business users. Their team, they run teams within the business, and they're accountable for making decisions and prioritisation of all of the work that that the development or delivery team works through. We have really frequent collaboration with them, and they meet every week. We basically have we don't have a product owner as such. The features group act as a product owner kind of committee, and we effectively have a sort of a product owner facilitator who corrals them and organises them to get decisions out of them. I think it's not necessarily ideal. There's definitely times when there's other ways that might be better, but we have to work with the organisation. Some things are just a little bit too hard to change, and there's definitely some people who need to have their views heard. So the committee approach actually seems to work reasonably well for us. At the very top of the Scaled Agile is the program portfolio management group. So the program board we have effectively has a full oversight of our change program. So that program board consists of members of the Treasury ELT. We've got external parties. We've got members of the Reserve Bank who sit on our program governance board, and they're basically responsible for the finances of the project and overseeing that we are delivering value and that they're willing to continue to fund us. The main focus for them is on the themes and epics that we're delivering, and obviously providing a strategic sort of lens across our change program. One of the things that I mentioned was the funding. So the program board basically decide whether or not they give us money. When we started the change program, we obviously put together a big investment business case that set out how much it was going to cost to do the work we were doing, next 5 years, first 3 years, how much money we wanted. When we started, they said, yep, no problem, we're going to give you the money. Now that doesn't really work very nicely. Well, I guess it works nicely in an agile environment, but it's not really being true to the agile values. So I guess what we're trying to do is encourage a more agile approach. I think it was mentioned yesterday around the beyond budgeting. It's not quite there, but it's in the same sort of mindset. We're trying to be more open and more transparent around the finances. So what we actually take is we take a more iterative approach. Basically, although we've been approved funding for the first 3 years, we only were allocated money for the first 2 to 3 months. Maybe a slightly interesting way of doing it. It definitely sort of challenges the norm, but it's really around trying to ensure that we're delivering business value. Basically, every 2 to 3 months, we go back to our program board and say, right, well, here's what we've done to this point. Are you happy? And if you're happy, here's the request for the next couple of months worth of funding. And it's actually working really well because of the increased transparency. Everyone through from the team right through to the top level feels more accountable, I think. The program board have the ability to make a decision and decide whether or not they want to stop. It hasn't happened. A couple of times there has been a bit of seesawing, but it's a really, really powerful thing. I think that it's also really good from a team motivational perspective. We're really lucky we have a team of really committed individuals. They really want to deliver the best they can, and they're aware of this. They know that at any point in time they could potentially decide to stop our funding. And I think that really does help to drive a minimum viable product approach. People are thinking about, I need to deliver the best value possible. I know that we need to show this to the business, we need to show this to the program board. They're coming to our demos, we're presenting back to them to show them the progress that we've reached. And if they aren't happy, then they might stop. So I think it's actually really, actually works really well. I think it's definitely worth trying. I don't know how many people take this sort of approach, but yeah, it's definitely worked really, really well for us. I guess the one thing to really be careful though is that some of the metrics that you might produce when you're providing the business, showing that you've delivered business value, can be really, really dangerous. So I just really want to tell a quick story, but what we maybe very naively decided to do was calculate a cost per point of our team. So we took all of the, we worked out how much all our resources, all our people cost, and worked out how much per sprint. We knew there was X amount of dollars per sprint. We knew roughly what our velocity was, so based on that, we could work out that X number of points cost X amount of dollars. Then taking a feature, we can work out how many stories go into a feature, the points on the stories, and then you have a cost per feature. And we presented this back to the features group, back to the program board, and they could see all that information. However, the problem then was that obviously velocities change, story sizes change as well. Work that was sized 2 years ago, when maybe people were new to estimating, they might have picked an 8 rather than a 1. Now we might be picking a 1 instead of an 8, or it ends up throwing things off quite drastically. When we ended up, and it caused a lot of strife and agony for myself and a couple of other team members, when you end up going into a meeting with a sponsor and they say, well, this feature over here costs this much money and it's this big, whereas this thing over here, I mean, what's going on? There was no context, or we didn't do a good enough job of providing context around those metrics. So I think you just really, really need to be careful that when you are providing any sort of metrics around cost and funding based on a lot of different assumptions, don't. Or at least be really, really careful and provide a lot of context around it, because it could really come back to burn you and cause a lot more stress than you need. Last couple of things I really want to talk about was culture. So I think that sort of by trying to adopt a full stack approach, we've done a reasonably good job of building a good team culture. So culture is obviously really, really complicated. There's no simple solution. There's lots of different factors and variables that go into building a good team culture. But I think by trying to build a collaborative and a team where they're accountable for the full end-to-end process really helps to encourage the right sort of culture. Trying to put those Agile values, thinking about the core values, the Agile manifesto, trying to put those into action to challenge the status quo, to try new things, to push the boundaries by actually going out and trying to get approval to put data in the cloud offshore in a foreign country. It really, I guess, there is no too hard basket for the team. Everyone in the team is willing to try and challenge the normal ways of thinking and try and look for better ways of doing things that are more agile, that deliver better value and deliver better business results. So yeah, I guess the really important things is please remember the Agile values. Everyone's been talking about it, so it should be an easy thing to remember. Think outside the scrum, think outside the team, think about other things that maybe aren't necessarily considered natural Agile disciplines like architecture and infrastructure, to how you can maybe try and make them more Agile, and yet really challenge people who say no, because there's a lot of value that you can realise by trying to be more agile. Cool. And that's me. Thank you for listening. I've probably got plenty of time for questions if anybody has any questions.
No, you've stolen my job.
Sorry.
Perfect. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, we do have plenty of time for questions. So, yeah, is a microphone ready to come around the room?
Hi, John Tucker from FishServe. Just a question, you mentioned costs going to cloud was cheaper. We've looked a number of times at moving away from our on-prem solution, which is highly virtualised.
Yep.
Every time it's more expensive. So the only way we can make it cheaper is by losing staff, by cutting headcount. So I was just curious to know what factors you included, what your infrastructure was to start with.
Okay. So I guess for us, we were obviously, it was a new change program for us. So we did have existing systems. I guess the existing systems we had were pretty basic and simple. Our infrastructure, I would suggest, was sort of originally around, maybe 4 servers. Where we're at now was pushing 80 or 90. So there's quite a big disconnect between that. So the costs, obviously, between our existing infrastructure and our new infrastructure is quite different. However, when we did the assessment around the costs compared to hosting in-house versus hosting in, say, the government cloud or likes of Amazon and Azure, they, from an infrastructure cost, were a lot less. I guess also being able to leverage a lot of the licensing. We still have enterprise licensing, which we get through as a part of the government, and we can use that in Azure, which is where we're hosting all our infrastructure. So we get the big licensing discounts as well. The cost, it really depends a little bit on what you're specifically doing, but we are very heavily data-centric. We're losing a lot of that sort of stuff. So I think that, we still definitely ended up being a lot better going to the cloud for our costs. Also the ability to turn stuff off, and if you're doing stuff in premise, then you're probably not going to realise that sort of cost. You also don't have to buy things up front. So I guess it's really a case-by-case basis, but we definitely ended up, when we did the assessments and things, it was a lot cheaper.
Could you tell us a little bit about your funding process? What is it that the board is approving? Are they looking at what you did in the past 3 months and saying, yep, that was good, have another go? Or do you give them, this is what we're going to do in the next 3 months? How do they make that decision?
Yep. So basically it's obviously a bit of both, right? So the program board have a strategic view. They're looking at what's coming up as well. So when we present to them every month and obviously show progress to date, showing everything that's been done, providing them demos, not every sprint, but every month or two. We provide demos to them so they can actually sort of really see what we've delivered. But they're also looking forward. So where our features group is more focused around the coming sprints and potentially the next sort of PSI, or say 8 to 10 week period, the program board is definitely thinking about the PSI, but also looking further ahead to the next year. From a funding perspective, obviously there's an aspect of looking at the track record and progress to date, trying to build confidence that the team are actually capable of continuing to deliver. They are delivering what's expected, and everyone's happy. But obviously looking forward as well, they know what's coming. They're not just going to give us money and let us sort of run off and build something and wait a couple of months to come back and say, well, actually, we didn't want that. So I think, there's definitely very much a looking forward. There is a work program and there's a plan of work out for us. At the moment, it's a good 18 months, maybe 2 more years worth of work that we've got lined up, and they're acutely aware of what's there. But obviously they're also really interested in how we're progressing at the moment to make sure that we are continuing to deliver.
And do they have any issues about knowing when they're going to get something? I mean, if they fund you for 3 months, say, and obviously they know what the backlog is there any angst about, how long is that going to take? When do we get something? We can see the backlog, but, what the sort of the velocity and throughput type conversations, does that come up?
No angst at the program board level, more at the features group. The program board are pretty, they are more of a hands-on, the features group are more concerned around the delivery. They're more interested in the actual sort of more, sprint metrics or scrum metrics around progress there. The program board are more interested at a feature or epic level. So we will show, for instance, in some of the reporting we do, we show them percentage completion of a feature or at an epic level, so they can see, well, this particular epic, you're 25% through that. Last time you reported you were 5% through that, so we're happy. They obviously also can say, well, this one here has only just progressed, why is that? And then there'll be some dialogue around that as well. So they're intentionally not going down to the detail of what's your velocity, which is good because velocity is so variable anyway that it can be meaningless.
I admire that you've gone rogue in terms of the enterprise, so that's got to be admired. But in terms of the enterprise itself, the organisation, how is it creating tension with you guys being agile and everybody else being that traditional methodology?
I guess the thing for us is that we are effectively the only development team or IT team within the business, within the Treasury business. So within Treasury, they have basically all of their, for instance, IT services are all outsourced to a central agency. So majority of Treasury are business focused, policy makers, those sort of advice giving sort of roles. Where we sit, being in an operational arm, they have specific technology needs. We have a specific specialist technology team that looks after them. Us working in Agile doesn't necessarily sort of create any kind of mismatch or anything between the rest of the organisation. I would say, though, that the rest of the organisation actually is reasonably agile anyway. The organisation itself is about 350 people. There's a lot of sort of Lean Six Sigma kind of work going on. There's a lot of continuous improvement work going on as well. So I think if you think about some of the mindset and some of the values, I think the organisation as a whole is reasonably adept with those. And a lot of people are interested in what we're doing. We do present internally what we're doing as well. So there's visibility around that, but we don't necessarily have sort of really any direct engagement from a delivery point of view at this point. Potentially in the future, when we start to expand beyond our particular business unit and look at how we interact with others, then there may be more interested in it, but I don't ever think there will be any sort of real concern around us doing something different from someone else, so, if that helps.
All right, thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you.
Maybe one last round of applause for Daniel.